Welcome to Sex Help for Smart People. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Juergens, former science professor turned somatic sexologist and intimacy coach. This podcast is all about using evidence-based practices to help high-achieving women and their partners of all genders get the affection, connection, and great sex you want. So let's get at it. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 10. Today we're going to talk about how to talk and when to talk to your partner about sex. This episode is for all of you out there in relationships or dating, and it will help you have the necessary conversations with less conflict and more connection, and overall just better results. So let's get started. All right, we are here for episode 10, and I want to start with a special invitation for everyone who's listening in the current moment in April 2024 when I am making this happen. Well, it's actually the tail end of March, but you're going to hear it in the beginning of April. I am offering a super cheap $10 workshop on de-escalating stress in the body on April 12th, 2024. If you want to learn a 5 to 10 minute simple approach to just downshift yourself out of feeling stressed out and emotionally activated, I got you. It is a virtual webinar. You can show up in your pajamas. You can show up anonymous with your camera off if you're really shy. You need absolutely nothing but your body. So bring that and you will have your skill forever. It's a big game changer both for you, but also for your relationships. When you know how to self-regulate, it really helps you feel safer, which is just a gift to yourself, but also helps everyone around you too. It feels really amazing being around people who self-regulate. I can absolutely promise that. And one of the things that I love about the people I now surround myself with, we don't always do it perfectly, but most of us get the basic concepts, and this is sort of the basic concept. If you liked that episode on attuning to yourself first, this is the next step. And I recommend definitely taking a listen to that episode again before the workshop. So when I learned this skill, it also helped me just stop snipping at people so much, which was really nice because I kind of felt guilty about that all the time. And it was also even one of the big pieces to helping me stop my wine habit with learning this simple skill. So 30-minute workshop, it's $10. And it's kind of a no-brainer. So if you want to get there and show up, grab the link in the show notes. It's also going to be at my website, laurajuergens.com/events. Okay, so today we're talking about when and how to talk to your partner or the people you're dating about sex. And we're going to cover talking during versus not during sex, ways to communicate that tend to land better for the other person and help you in turn, therefore, get heard, and ways to listen that enable more connection and resolution. And we'll, of course, wrap up with an exercise for you to take this skill into your life more fully. All right, maybe you have some things to discuss if you are in a relationship or if you are dating. In fact, I'll say you almost certainly have some things to discuss. Even if you've had all these conversations before, people change and grow if they are growth-oriented people. And I hope, since you are a growth-oriented person, because you are here listening to this podcast, I hope that you and your partner are both growth-oriented people. And chances are you're going to need to keep checking in as you and your partner discover new things about yourselves or step into new ways of being. So some things you may want to discuss are, and I recommend discussing all of these for sure at some point. I'm just going to give some examples that I think are kind of the baseline, bare minimum list of things to talk about with sex partners. And I'm going to put all of these in the show notes so you have them to refer to if you want to check and see if you've had all these conversations, or if you just need to refresh some of them since you haven't had them in a while. So some of the things that you might want to discuss, and of course you'll have your own additional list, are, what would make sex extra amazing for your partner? What would you like more of? What would you like to try that you haven't tried before? How do you like to be invited to sexy times? What kind of flirting feels really good to you? What kind of flirting feels really good to them? How do you like to be escalated with? So that is, anything like moving to a sort of more intense level of sexy times. So moving from flirting to touch, from making out to getting those clothes off. How do you like to be asked about genital touch before it happens? How do you like to be checked in before any sort of insertion? Those are kind of the escalation questions. How do your genitals particularly like to be touched? What helps you get off? What gets in the way of your arousal or hinders your orgasm? What do you like as a check-in for when you'd like to wrap up or end sex? When does sex sort of end for you? It's not obvious to everybody, and it shouldn't just be because the person who is male identified has an orgasm, which is often the default assumption for heterosexual couples in particular, in the US anyway. So what kind of aftercare do you like is another question. And by aftercare, I mean, when the sexy times do come to a close, how can you support each other to come down from that in a gentle, connected way? Not everybody wants to just roll over and start snoring. Some other things that you might want to talk about are more logistical. The basics of when were you last tested and what were the results, right? How many partners do you currently have and what are your safety practices with them? Do you want to be monogamous or non-monogamous? And how do you like to organize that? How do you define and communicate around monogamy or non-monogamy? Those are all important logistical conversations. And you'll have all kinds of other things you want to talk to partners about. How you organize your finances together if that's something you do. How, any sort of like householdy things that come up when you start cohabitating, when you start having kids and co-parenting. If you just choose to do that, you're going to have a lot of things to talk about, right? All kinds of conversations. So that's just a list of some of the what, but I also want to talk about when and how today. And this can seem, I was talking to a friend about this today, and I was like, I do this so much now. It's all internalized. I really, though, want to unpack it for people because I didn't always do this. And so many of us are trying to navigate the when and how to talk about things with our partners, and we're kind of just doing it blindly and trying things out. And then when something doesn't work, we think, oh my gosh, I can't talk to them about that. Or, oh, this is just impossible, right? Sometimes it's just a matter of a little tweak about when you talk to them or a little, massaging of your approach, right? Learning some new skills around communication. So that's what we're doing today. So the when first, I'm going to talk about when to talk about sex. So in the middle of sexy times, in the moment when you're actually having some sex, the conversations that work best are fairly limited. I think there are 4 big categories of conversations that can absolutely happen when you're in the middle of sexy times. Number 1, brief directions. So that category is everything from stop, pause, slow down, keep doing that, go back to that last bit, please. All of the, could you do that lighter, harder, more consistently, to the left, on my hip, whatever. Brief directions. The second category is when you do stop or pause, asking for things your nervous system needs at a very basic level. This could sound like, hey, I need to pause, and could you just hold me tight for a minute? Or I need more warm up, hun. How about we keep making out for a while and then let's check in before going further? It could be something like, can we just take a moment to check in on how everyone's feeling right now? It would really help me to have a conversation about feelings in the moment. If you're a hyperverbal person like me, you may have noticed, that is one of my traits. I started talking at 9 months old. Yep, I know. I was one of those creepy babies. I couldn't walk, but I could talk. So if you are a hyperverbal person like me, you may need actually to check in words. If you are not a very verbal person, it may be challenging for you to check in words, and you may need a minute to sort of breathe and kind of, come out of your sort of full body embodied state in order to verbalize. And if that is hard for you, and if your partner, so if the two of you have different styles with verbalization, don't talk about it during sex. Try to talk about that later. The most you can really say if you're a person who struggles with verbalization during sex, which is a large number of people, there's nothing wrong with you. It just means that you're in your body, and that's wonderful. You're in the present moment. Just say, hey, it's hard for me to talk right now. Words are hard right now. So that's number 2, is just basic things your nervous system needs when you stop or pause. The third type that works during sex is any emergency management things you need to do to feel safe. Absolutely. Please do them. Please ask for it. So that can be anything that feels like you need to do to feel safe. Number 4 is role play or playful words, including dirty talk, safe words, and any sort of sexy talk you've discussed beforehand, which I really recommend at some point having that conversation, not during sex, but at another time. What kind of things do you love to hear from me during sex? What's a sentence I could say that would be really hot while we're making out? Get creative. Like, these are fun conversations to have. So there's fun conversations, there's hard conversations, there's neutral conversations in relationships, all of the above. But everything else besides the sort of emergency management or basic directions or kind of role play and playful words that you've talked about beforehand, everything else, feedback, preparation, negotiation, that is all best done at another time when you are not in the middle of sex. And this is especially true if you are someone who is not super verbal during sex. But for everybody, take a time, a neutral time when there is no sex on the table, when you have an amount of privacy that feels good to both of you, and plenty of time to hear everyone. So what that means is schedule it and be generous. So whether you're dating or in a relationship, remember, it is really hot, super hot, and admirable to be able to say, hey, babe, I'd like to plan a time where we can both be open and honest about X. Or maybe, hey, new person I'm dating, I would love to schedule a time when we can talk about what we like and what we want during intimacy. Are you up for that? That is really sexy. When you meet somebody who can adult at that level, who is wanting to have that conversation with you, who wants to be open and honest, and who's thoughtful enough to schedule it in advance, yes, please. Okay, so be that person. It's hot. If you are in an ongoing relationship, I highly recommend a weekly check-in. This might be a new concept. So hang on with me while I explain some of the benefits, and you can see whether you want to try it out. I literally cannot stress how much I recommend this. It is the best thing ever and sort of relationship magic. For me, for my clients, when I started doing this in my primary relationship, oh my gosh, everything just feels so much more relaxed. And the reasons are, there's a few reasons. The first one is knowing that you have a time to talk about your relationship lets you head off resentments before they happen. So there's no stewing. There's no sitting there making these little hurts bigger and bigger, which isn't really fair to our partner, but is really easy to do when we just sit and stew and we don't know when to talk about it. We don't know when's a good time. They seem busy. We're busy. So it's a huge relief and a gift to yourself and each other if you have a set time so that nobody ever stews, the relationship resentments don't get bigger. All right, number 2, relatedly, everyone can come emotionally prepared when you have a time scheduled. That will always improve your odds of being heard if you have something that is hurting. So if you do have challenging topics to bring up, maybe you really want to change your sex life. Maybe you want to open your relationship. Oh my gosh, schedule those conversations, right? Maybe it's just been really hurting that your partner hasn't been making time for foreplay and sort of just keeps sort of being like, well, hey, you want to just have sex right now? Maybe that's just not feeling good to you. That is a sensitive conversation. Making sure that you are both primed to show up, knowing it will be a time when stuff could come up that is emotional, and everybody is prepared to listen. So emotional stuff coming out of the blue generally triggers defensiveness in the vast majority of people, the vast majority of the time, right? It definitely does for me. I, really try, I very much try to listen well, but if I'm not prepared and it comes out of the blue, I can't promise that I'm going to listen very well. So that number 2 is basically keeping a scheduled time keeps us from ambushing each other. All right. Number 3, the reason to have these weekly check-ins if you're in a relationship is that you get to do horizon scans. You can prepare for tough situations coming up and pre-plan how to deal with them together. So this is amazing for working people, parents, other busy folks, normal humans, right? Thinking ahead about, okay, well, we have this event with the family this weekend, or, my sister and her 5 kids are coming to stay with us. Maybe what are we going to do to stay connected? Okay. You also, number 4 is that you both get to automatically feel extra cared for and prioritized because your partner set aside time for you and your relationship. And it's just built into your schedule. And it feels lovely and really good to receive that as being prioritized every week. You get to see evidence that your relationship is important in their life consistently every week. Yay. Okay, number 5, if you have no topics that week, nobody comes with any sort of horizon scanny things. Nobody comes with any things that are just feeling hard for them, or that they just want to check in about like how each other is feeling emotionally. Nobody comes with anything at all. Everybody's kind of neutral. Doesn't maybe happen that often, but it does occasionally. Then you get to just snuggle and give each other appreciations for how great you are and how awesome it is that you are together. Yay. All right. So the last thing I just want to say about this is remember, if it feels weird to schedule check-in time with your partner every week, recall that you did this naturally all the time while dating and establishing your relationships. That's what dates were. I will say that I firmly believe these weekly check-ins are more important than quote-unquote date nights where you just go do something. Having intentional connection time where you're both bringing open hearts, open minds, a willingness to listen to each other about how you're feeling in the relationship is more important weekly maintenance than sitting in a movie theater together or going to Applebee's or whatever. So you can combine them if you're a big date night fan. That's awesome. Do the check-in hour first and then go out feeling more connected and authentic together. Okay, try it out. Stick to it for a minimum, I'd say, of about, 12 weeks or something and see how you feel together. I have a feeling you're going to really like it. Okay, so that's the when. Keep it to a minimum during sexy times. plan conversations as much as possible for any sort of in-depth stuff, right? And if you are in an ongoing relationship, try to plan them proactively. And that will help you have a really solid connection that feels more relaxed and more easeful and keeps everybody from feeling sort of, when do I talk about this? I've been holding on to it because I don't know when to talk about it, or keeps people from feeling ambushed and all that stuff. All right. So what about the how? Whatever you're talking about, I'm assuming you would like it to go well. And by go well, I mean you'd like to have a conversation where you learn about each other, how to help your sexy times go great, and that you have conversations where everyone feels honest and basically close to calm, even if they feel vulnerable, or at least not defensive and triggered, right? You going well means everyone gets a chance to feel heard and receive empathy and respect. There are some things we can all do to make that more likely. And it's not a guarantee. There's nothing you can do to guarantee somebody else is going to react in a certain way. That is a manipulation fantasy. A lot of us who have people pleaser tendencies sort of inadvertently think that by being super duper kind and passive all the time, we can magically make other people behave certain ways. And it's, not true. Okay, so there's no guarantee. We can't control other people's feelings or perceptions, but we can maximize our chance of a copacetic conversation, right? And unfortunately, if we just go with our default tendencies as normal human beings, including me, including you, including everyone else in the world, our subconscious will always make us try to avoid real vulnerability and emotional responsibility. It's just a fact of life. Please try to accept it. Our subconscious will always try to make us avoid vulnerability and emotional responsibility. It is only by real practice and intentionality that we can allow ourselves to take responsibility, and as much as we can, also knowing our boundaries, right? And knowing what we're not responsible for, and show up in vulnerability with courage. Okay, so our default, if we can accept, is not going to be great. And I mean, literally everyone. So every therapist I've ever known, in fact, some of them have really big problems with this. All humans, no matter how much work you've done, have the tendency to default to protectiveness, right? And unfortunately, it generally guarantees defensiveness on the part of the other person, breakdowns in connection, and often fights. So we need to really curb our tendencies and learn when and how to approach challenging conversations in particular, right? If it's a fun conversation, or we think it's going to be a fun conversation, or sometimes it winds up being challenging. Things can take left turns, right? But a lot of times we know it's going to be a challenging conversation. We know we might be activated. We know the other person might be feeling defensive. And those are tough to have in relationship, but they're also really important to have in relationship. And I see so many people and couples whose relationships have broken down because resentments were allowed to linger and not get resolved. And actually, there's ways to learn how to go into conflict and come out the other side even more connected, knowing more about each other and knowing how to love each other better. And that skill of repair is a really important part of why I do this work, what I do with clients, and I just love it so much. It is challenging, but I am going to give you some very basic ways to start. I used to think difficult conversations were just too hard, and I wanted to avoid them because I really was scared of breaking the connection. And I kind of wanted to sit with my resentment instead and see if I could just quote unquote get over it. And that is an unrealistic expectation to be honest. Most of us don't just get over things that felt hurtful. And it actually, when I learned how to do these conversations, I realized that those moments are opportunities. They're opportunities for me to show up for myself, and they're opportunities to let somebody care for me by learning how to care for me better. Not that they have to take responsibility for my feelings. They don't. But we can talk about how I feel. I can let them see it. And we can see if maybe together there's some ways that we can minimize the chance of that happening in the future, right? Or at least accept that when I do get hurt in those situations, I might need a little support or help, right? Okay, so just know that if having difficult conversations is hard for you, you are very normal. There is nothing wrong with you. It was very hard for me once upon a time, and it really helped for me to practice in low stakes situations with a coach. And now I'm fully capable of doing it on my own, and I still sometimes reach out to a colleague for a little preparation or practice if the subject feels really weighty and vulnerable. And I did that this week with a friend. I reached out to a colleague beforehand, before having a challenging conversation, because I knew I was really activated and I wanted to try some things out and workshop it with somebody who wasn't involved in the situation first. So just know there's a lot of options for you. You don't have to sort of sit there in resentment and letting it get worse and worse, or just feeling misunderstood or hurt and never talking about it. All right. So I can't teach all the principles of nonviolent, emotionally vulnerable communication in this podcast, and I will not try. It would be many hours long and everybody would fall asleep. But I can make a couple of big suggestions that encompass the most important things about when relationship conversations get tough. So here we go. Number one, there are three. Number one is try to give the benefit of the doubt to both of you before you engage in a difficult conversation. Now, look, hopefully you have learned from that Attune to Yourself First podcast how to check in on your activation state, how to know what number you are on the scale. And it's really important to know that if you are anywhere over at a 4 or higher, 4 to 10, you are really emotionally activated, and it is not a good time to have a tough conversation. So I'm not talking about that. We already covered that. What I'm talking about is when you are calm enough that you can give yourself and the other person the benefit of the doubt. Make sure to do it. Take a moment to remind yourself that you are not bad for whatever you did, or however you're responding, or however you're feeling. Even if there's ways you might want to show up differently in the future, even if this conversation is a conversation where you have to cop to something that was hard, you are not a bad person, even if there's some reasonable guilt there. And we'll talk more really soon, actually, about releasing shame and allowing a useful guilt instead. But just know that feeling shitty about yourself never helps you learn to do better. So give yourself the benefit of the doubt, and also see if you can give. It's really important to see if you can believe in the other person's good intentions. Give the benefit in the other direction, right? You only want to have conversations about difficult things or things that might be emotionally difficult when you're able to see and believe that the other person has good intentions and doesn't mean to hurt you. Number 2, this is a really hard one. I think they're all kind of hard. This one is really hard. Try to find your true emotion underneath any of the blame or deflection that is natural when we feel self-protective. So what you want to do is try to find the impact on you and speak to that, not the laundry list of everything they fucked up and all the ways they did wrong. Now, I will tell you, I am the first person who wants to go to that laundry list. When I am activated, I lawyer up. I want to tell you the point by point ways that everything you did was wrong. And I don't want to talk about why or how it hurt me. I don't want to talk about my feelings. I just want to talk about why you were wrong. That is my default. There are many people like me out there. There are also some people who kind of want to go into full victim mode. And it's this sort of like, woe is me kind of vibe. It's also not honestly vulnerable. It's also a way of deflecting and blaming. There's all kinds of different coping mechanisms, and none of us are wrong for having them. We're just human beings. But what we can learn when we put some effort into it is to find the true emotion underneath our reflex to protect. And what most people do first is either try straight blame, like my little laundry list of what everybody did wrong, or pseudo feelings that are blame in disguise. And they start out with, I feel like, blah, 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 in front of it. So, for example, I feel like you're not listening to me, or I feel like you don't care about me. Those are pseudo feelings. Because notice when I say, I feel like you don't care about me, it feels like I'm accusing you of not being a caring person or not caring about me, right? Because I kind of am. I'm not actually saying how I'm feeling. I've basically said, here's what you're doing wrong, just like my little laundry list. Not here's how I feel, here's how the thing that you did, whatever it was, or the thing that happened, you may not have even done it, impacted me. So if you use or imply the words you're being or you're doing X, that's usually what's happening. So if instead, here I am, your partner again, and I say, when this thing happens, this thing where I think you're not listening, right? I say, I feel unimportant and angry. Those are the emotions. For me, those are some pretty common emotions when I think somebody is just like persistently not listening to me. I might feel unimportant to them. I might feel angry. Or if I think you're actually criticizing me, I might say, look, those words made me feel really inadequate and defensive. Those are my actual emotions. And it is much more vulnerable and takes a lot more courage to say our actual emotions. It's also a lot more effective because instead of sort of sneakily attacking the other person's character, which is just going to get their hackles up and have them fixated on that, we have instead invited them to notice that we are feeling unimportant and angry or inadequate and defensive or whatever it is that we're feeling. Maybe we're just feeling hurt. And most of the time we need to step back from the emotions in order to identify them. And a lot of times we actually need help. So something like Google the feelings wheel. It's very helpful. There's lots of different versions. And look through the emotions to find the ones you are actually experiencing. And don't expect yourself to do it perfectly or 100% of the time. But it really does help you get heard and help the other person enable themselves to feel empathy with how you are feeling, instead of kind of creating this blame tennis match where we're tossing the blame ball back and forth. Okay, so number 2 was try to find your true emotion and the bravery to speak it. And number 3 is the reverse. It's really, as the listener, try to listen for the emotions and then reflect empathy back to the person speaking. This is also really challenging, especially when someone you care about is telling you that you've hurt them in some way, right? It can be really hard to receive. The idea is to step back for a moment and just empathize with the emotions the person experienced rather than getting bogged down in taking on blame about it. What is it like to feel that emotion? Have you ever felt that? See if you can mirror back what they say and then show that you can imagine how it felt. This will keep you out of that horrible tar pit pitfall of making it all about you, right? We've all been accused of that before, probably because we've all done it a bunch. But focusing on how whatever it was felt for them, the emotional part will help keep you out of that. All right. These are all really nuanced skills, all three of them. Giving benefit of the doubt both ways, speaking vulnerably with courage, listening with empathy takes a lot of bravery too. So it's okay. I took a lot of training and practice to get good at this, and I still sometimes reach out to people for support. And I work with clients all the time to practice these things together because we really do need practice in order to nail it. But at least these three things you can be aware of and start kind of maybe bringing a little bit into your day-to-day life. Thinking about trying to identify your feelings, including the good ones, and really feel, what is it that I'm feeling? How could I express this to someone? Practicing listening with empathy and just trying to reflect back the feelings you hear instead of focusing on who did what. Okay? So those things will really be game changers. Taking moments to give yourself and the other person the benefit of the doubt. You can start with all of those things. And if you want to get really good at them, or you have really big feelings to deal with, I do recommend reaching out for some help. And you can always reach out to me for a consultation if that's something that you would like. All right, everyone. So your exercise invitation today is to think about something small that you would like to ask for in a relationship. It can be a romantic relationship or not. You can even go to the list of topics I suggested earlier in the episode if you are going to try to think of one for a sexy partner. But just think of something you want to ask for that is small, not your biggest, deepest, darkest resentment, because we're going to use this to practice. And practice makes all the bigger stuff easier. So write down your one simple thing that you want to ask for. Then write down 3 values that you want to approach the conversation with. So values, a lot of values for me are things like authenticity, honesty, straightforwardness, clarity, there's all kinds of values out there, right? Just think about what are the values for you that you want to bring to that conversation. And then challenge yourself to try it out. And this is why we're starting with something small. So if you, like I used to, find this very hard, that's good information for yourself and may mean you need to practice in a lower stakes relationship or with somebody who's not involved. So try finding a good friend, for example, and just role playing it with them. It's not a crazy thing to do. It is a normal thing to ask for. I do that with friends. It's really helpful. It also lets them know that they could do that with you, and all of a sudden you have a new dimension to your relationship. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Take these skills out on the road when and how to have relationship conversations with your dating or romantic partners, and I will see you here next week. If this podcast was helpful for you, please consider going to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leaving a 5-star review. Not only do I really appreciate your time doing that, but 5-star reviews really boost the show visibility, which helps people just like you who need it be able to find it. Thank you so much. I'll see you here next week.